nowadays businesses increasingly relies on vendors. However, if vendor exploit their workers because considering lower wage rate or unsafe working conditions, so it will be not good for the organizations. Organization heavily relies on vendor development or the vendor because they try to leverage cost advantage, and they are trying to improve the resilience in the dynamic environment. However, if things are coming because worker vendors are exploiting their workers, then it will be not good for company. So what companies should do? And if company tells their glowing story, then it will be not a company's story, rather it's a vendor exploiting a story. So what we can do? So you all have very wide experience in your own area, so we are looking forward to listen your views. So first question is, often companies look away from vendor exploitation because of cost pressure or supply chain dependence. So do you agree this is the case? And what is the solution for?
Companies always know something like this happens. The answer necessarily doesn't need to be yes, neither does it need to be no, right? It's actually case to case basis, because now the entire process has become a lot more regulated, if I may say. There are a lot of third party risk management practices which are used in vendor management also in most of the larger companies, right? Where you typically see this is possibly the mid-size and the smaller companies where it's not regulated properly, where processes do not exist. It is just the owner knows the owner to whom he is giving the contract, he gives the contract, he doesn't care how and when it happens, right? So I think that segregation becomes very important in the discussion to this topic, because then it is two ends of the spectrum. Now, do companies know and not do anything about it? That also is a yes and a no both. I've seen cases where people know, but they don't bother saying, I can't help, I can't run the entire value chain, right? It is what it is. I can only have checks and balances in my contracting with the vendor. How the vendor treats his people is his lookout. If people have problems, they should report it, right? Does every time reporting help? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So I think there's no straight answer to it. It is, does it exist? It certainly exists. There are no second thoughts on it, because, and it exists in multiple formats. There are people who make employees work overtime, not get paid for it. That also is an exploitation in some form or the other, right? You're in white collar or blue collar is a different story, but a lot of white collar, we've seen a lot of instances in the past years where a lot of people, due to sheer exhaustion and stress, have had issues with employees, etc. But there is enough and more. Is it whatever is happening at every place, is it enough for what is required? The answer is no. It is certainly not enough. But it's a cultural change that needs to come in the way we work, right? Because till that comes in, I don't think this problem can be rooted out in its entirety.
Yeah. As I said, it's like a yes and a no. It like happens at the lower level, but it might not happen. But at every level, the vendors are not truthful to whatever contracts they sign, because at like a lower level, it's very difficult to track what's going on there. As management, when you know about it, in some cases you will call up and then you can replace a vendor, change the contract and all that. But in some cases, because the pressure of the delivery, they let it go under the slide. And again, in some organizations I've seen where it's almost like that vendor has a connection or a social, like a personal connection with the management. So whatever he does goes under the hood, and that's also rampant across our country. It could be called as corruption in some cases, where you prefer a vendor because he gets it done without auditing the books and all that. So some management know about it, they let it go because they want the larger picture there, and some stringent ones will go forward and make sure the vendor's contract gets cancelled and all that. So it becomes more of a conscious commodity where you as a individual or as a company, what you represent, what values you want to do. If that exploitation is seeing, if your conscience is not allowing for you to do it, you should go and call it and pull the plug. So there's no question. But again, being in the country where we are, the deals happen, the targets are there, deadlines are getting shorter, the pressure is there at every level to deliver. So all these compromises, we have seen it and we know it happens. There's nothing, all of us know that this is happening, but we don't do anything about it. So it's just life goes on in this country.
So good part is that at least we are started discussing on this area.
Yeah, at least we are open. As you said, the corporate segment cannot have us know that, because even if you take the real estate now, every construction company you see, the vendors who are there, the labor that comes in are supposed to wear helmets. Even one person is not with a helmet, the contract gets cancelled. And the most rampant issue with our construction industry is the gutka spitting habit. So at the gate, you would have seen for all corporate ventures, there's a security guard. He frisks the person. There's nothing allowed inside except the tools they need. And that is happening only at the corporate level. Again, you take smaller apartments and other things, all that is bypassed. It's all done in the paper that NOC is cleared, fire NOC is cleared. 6 months later, fire is in the building. So it's there at different levels because we've adopted MNCs and we've adopted the international standards. We have increased our safety and our quality checks, but not fully all the way. So we are getting there.
In my view, businesses run and should run on a syntax of trust. And if that's not happening, that's not there, it's not going to be a sustainable, business in the long run. So if as a corporate, you're turning a blind eye to some vendor that is exploiting its people or it's whatever they're doing, then you should be willing to suffer the consequences at some stage or the other. So my view is that, these are such fundamental things, right? If you're trying to build a business that is sustainable, that is something that you'll reap rewards in the long run, you better do some of these basic things right. You can't just let vendors exploit people or whatever that they're doing. Or similarly, you can't let yourself being exploited as well. You have to have the power to be able to say that, I cannot be exploited. And if you're not able to say that, that means you are probably not in the right business, or you probably don't have the strength to be able to run the business by yourself. So that's my view at a very high level.
I think it's very important as a leader sets the standard, right? And how do you want to really run a business which is ethically right? And you're able to really define certain processes. You can't control everything. And what we had been able to do is, we said for the top 80% of the contracts that we are engaged, we want to make sure that there are certain compliances are made mandatory. And we also, any reporting that happens when it comes to the renewal, this will get discussed along with the renewal cycle. So we really mandated on few things. I think it is very important as a leader, you set the standard, you want to make sure that how do you want the processes to be complied, because we also have one end on the customers and the one end on the vendors. So you just want to make sure that it's a continuum that you want to really pass it on. So how you get treated, you want to make sure that your vendors get treated the same way and they treat their employees the same way. So it is important to really create this as a continuum and make them to really be aware of. I think this awareness was missing in terms of what they need to be compliant, how they need to really bring in, especially the EHS part that is being talked about. How do you think some of the labor laws are being compliant? I think there may be a kind of a risk mitigation strategies that was used in the past. I don't want to do certain tasks. It's better to get it done from vendors because the risk is high. But I think that part is now coming to a point saying that irrespective of who gets done, how do you think we're able to put some guardrails and make sure that it is being done in the right way? Because even if there are cases that has happened where some vendors employee has died on an accident and it was on official work. Now, are you directly responsible or not, right? Because in reality, as you are actually ethically responsible, whether you are directly involved or indirectly involved. How do you make sure that there is some compensation structure, whether it is contractually allowed or not? How do you think you are able to really help them to make some of these things happen? I think it's very important to really bring some of the practices which are in the paper or not necessarily in the paper. How do you think you're able to balance it in terms of the spirit and letter? I think that's going to be very critical for the